Replication project by Heather, Kayla, Reagan, and Sylvie. So this is our table of contents. First, we have supporting literature, followed by purpose of the project, then a method section, a result section, our conclusion, and lastly, our limitations. Our supporting literature. So to begin, smartphone use and academic performance of university students, mediation and moderation analysis. The purpose of the study is to essentially observe the performance of college students across many universities in Pakistan. It had been found that cell phones have a major influence on individuals' academic performance. There were two variables involved in the study, the mediator, which was the attitude and electric word of mouth from the students, and then the moderator, which was addiction and technology. This study put two different groups of students. The study took two different groups and put them, they separated them. So one of them was students who used their cell phones during class and studying, and then the other one was students who did not use their phones during class and studying. It was found that cell phones damage college students' academic performance. Cell phone use and its effects on undergraduate academic performance. The study talked about college students within the classroom and how cell phones influence their academic performance. The focus of this article is to see how cell phones affect college students' performance in school. The overall grade point average is what was being measured. Other factors that were being measured were interactions between students and teachers and the effect technology had on students within the classroom. It was found that making a policy about cell phone use in class on the syllabus would impact students' grades in a better way. Cell phone addiction explains how cell phones impair learning for lecture materials. This research study is based on insufficient learning, which could potentially be due to cell phone use. The researchers are trying to figure out whether or not phone use is based on addiction, anxiety, or a disconnect. The study was put into two different groups. One where you were allowed to use your cell phone during academic use, and in the other group you weren't allowed to. Each group had to watch a video, and the group who had phones received numerous messages which caused more distractions, resulting in that group performing worse on the test. In conclusion, it was found that cell phones are linked to addiction and distraction when it comes to test taking. Allowing students to have access to their cell phones during class allowed this type of behavior and harms learning. Teenagers' smartphone use during homework, an analysis of beliefs and behaviors around digital multitasking. Based on research, it was shown that the use of cell phones during educational activities is harmful for two things: learning and performance. This was conducted on 135 high school students from 4 different schools across the United States. It was shown that 38% of the time students were distracted using their phones, and 64% of the time students said that they should focus more while doing homework. It was noted that it takes about 204 hours a year to do homework, but teens often get distracted, so it takes longer. Reducing adolescent cell phone usage using an independent group contingency. This was our original study. So, the study speaks of an independent group contingency on the usage of cell phones in a high school classroom. An ABAB reversal design is utilized to determine how successful the contingency on the cell phone usage is with one student and the whole class. It was found that the usage of cell phones went down, showing a functional relation with the contingencies and the adolescent phone usage. Based on the studies, group contingencies can be successful for educators to utilize within classrooms to eliminate the usage of cell phones.
Hold on. I can't hear you. Okay, purpose of the study. The purpose of this study was to decrease time spent on a cell phone during study sessions for each student. Why was this important? It had been proven that decreasing time spent on cell phones can improve the quality of the study sessions. This can affect things such as like GPAs or test scores. And based on the research that was provided by Selby, it was shown that the use of your cell phone during educational activities is harmful to two things, which can include the learning and the performance as found. The students were also testing to see if the DRO procedure was effective in decreasing the time spent by using the reward of having the phone after a study session that had 0 minutes. Methods. During the methods, there's participants and settings. A total of 4 graduate level students, all were female between the ages of 21 and 28, participated. Ethnic backgrounds were all Caucasian. The students in the study attended the same master's program online to earn a degree in applied behavior analysis with an emphasis on autism. The students attended the same applied behavior analysis course with the same professor throughout the entire semester. The school in which the students attended was Ball State University, and it was an online course, which kind of had diverse settings, but everybody was in the same Eastern time zone. Data was collected in the personal spaces of each of the students' houses during the study sessions across the United States. So while there were no stipulations on whether students could study, they could study wherever they felt that they needed to. So some could study in coffee shops, some were at home, and others could be at a family member's house. Methods, materials. So for this study, you needed to include any form of homework or study materials such as books, papers, pens, and computers. A cell phone was a must need, and an off-screen app to record, time task, or manual timer. There were complications while using the app, so this is why some of it was transferred over to a manual timer in order to track their data as limited as possible. Furthermore, the cell phone could be any brand of cell phone. It didn't have to be a specific one. So methods, the actual behavior definition, and some examples. In this study, cell phone usage was defined by any form of touching, swiping the screen, looking at, or continuing to manipulate the phone using one or two hands in the form of texting or engaging with any phone app. So an example of this would have been a student getting on their phone to scroll through Facebook. A non-example would have been a student picks up the phone to move it so they aren't distracted. Methods, data collection. Data was collected in the form of duration of cell phone usage during the study. This was what the off-screen timer was used for, or the manual timer, whichever was preferred by the student. Data from the off-screen app was discussed during weekly meetings held on Thursdays and added to a Microsoft Excel sheet where data was compared and interpreted. There was also like a graph that was related to the charts, which was easy. Participants used a reversal design to compare the baseline data to the intervention data to show the effects of the withdrawal of an independent variable and the dependent variables. Methods design. The study focused on reducing cell phone usage during the students' time spent on academic work. So the overall goal was to decrease time spent in studying in order to increase the value of the study session itself. The students conducted 1-hour study sessions 5 times a week, during which they aimed to reduce the cell phone usage. The sessions could be conducted anywhere. In order to stay on track, participants met weekly on Thursdays to compare data and graphs, and the Excel tables and graphs were continuously tracked progress over the course of the study. Meetings, we found, were better used on Zoom than any other method, and while the same type of graphs were being used, it was up to each individual to keep up with their graphs, and at the end of the semester, there was IOA data compared as well as TI forms.
So we're going to go over the procedures used for this study. For the replication project that it was looking to increase focus during study sessions. So in the beginning of the project, we collected baseline data just to track the amount of minutes that we were already spending on our phone during an hour-long study session. This was used with the phone app for students that it was working, or a manual timer. The app was used for tracking time spent on your phone through, the app was called Off Screen, and others that the app didn't work for just used a timer on their watch or on their computer. And then we also collected this baseline data so we could see how long students were starting off in their study sessions using their phone, so that way we could use that data to compare it once we started implementing the intervention. The intervention procedure included informing the students as part of our project that they would only be permitted to watch the streaming service of their choice if they successfully refrained from using their phone during the entire study session. The intervention strategies that were recommended to increase success of this treatment were to put the cell phone down and turn it over, put it on do not disturb mode, or even putting it in another room or turning it off completely. Treatment fidelity. This is important to ensure that our intervention is being implemented with competency, that it's consistently being consistently being collected, and that it's reliably and honestly being collected during the study. So that for us to ensure that treatment fidelity was being implemented correctly, we had an intervention checklist put into place. So this checklist was completed by each student twice a week, and it was used to ensure that each student understood the contingencies and understood what they should be tracking with their data. So the intervention checklist being completed twice a week, when data was being collected 5 to 6 times a week, would ensure that treatment fidelity was completed for 33 to 40% of sessions. And then treatment fidelity was calculated by adding the number of times that the students marked off yes on the indicated checklist, and then dividing that number by the total number of questions that was asked from the checklist. Then this number was multiplied by 100, so that we could get the percentage of treatment fidelity. So this is an example of the treatment fidelity checklist that we used. The intervention checklist would have the students fill out their name, what the week was, and which study session that they were completing it for. And then it asked 4 questions, which were that the student determined what reinforcer is most motivating. So this would be determining which streaming show they were going to watch if they successfully stayed off their phone for the entire study session. The next question was that they review the target behaviors necessary for gaining access for reinforcement. And then they would make sure to start the timer for the beginning of the study session. And the 4th question would be that they provided or withheld reinforcement accordingly. So again, this checklist was to be filled out twice a week by each student for the calculations of treatment fidelity for our group, it shows that each student completed the checklist and said yes for all of the questions. So therefore, on the treatment fidelity, all of the students had 100% treatment fidelity. For the inter-observer agreement, we needed to use 2 of the students to observe the data so that we could have 2 different collectors collecting data that could be compared. So this consisted of the primary data collector and the reliability data collector. We just needed to collect IOA because it's important to ensure that the data is being recorded accurately, and a high IOA indicates high quality data. So the students for this study took videos of themselves studying for the sessions that would be used for inter-observer agreement, and then we paired into groups so that we could watch each other's videos, and the reliability collector could also collect data from the video of the study session, and then we could use the primary data collector and the reliability data collector to compare those data to calculate the IOA. We used the total duration IOA formula because this is the best method when measuring the duration of a behavior. So the IOA calculation was taking the smaller duration and dividing it by the larger duration and then multiplying that by 100 to get the IOA percentage. So these tables are going to show the IOA percentages and the data that was collected by the primary collector and the reliability collector. So table number 1 is Heather's data collector. She was the primary collector, and as you can see, the reliability collector had data that agreed with Heather's original data, so the calculations showed that they had 100% IOA percentage. Table number 2 was Kayla was the primary collector, and as you can see, the reliability collector collected the same amount of minutes for time spent on the phone during the IOA sessions. So she also had 100% for her IOA collection. Table number 3 is Selvi, and her reliability collector also had data that agreed with her primary data points. So she also had 100% inter-observer agreement. And Reagan was for table number 4. They also had agreeing data across the inter-observer agreement, so they both had 100% for their IOA data collection.
All right, section 4 results. So in the top left corner, we have Heather's graph. In the top right corner, we have Reagan's graph. And in the bottom left corner, we have Kayla, my graph. And in the bottom right corner, we have Selby's graph. So the x-axis depicts the session number, while the y-axis depicts the minutes spent on phone. For consistency across participants, time spent on phone was rounded up to the nearest whole minute. If the duration was 30 seconds or less, it was rounded down to the closest whole minute. If the duration was 31 seconds or more, it was rounded up to the closest whole minute. All graphs depict an AB-AB reversal design with phases being baseline, differential reinforcement of other behavior, DRO, return to baseline, and return to DRO. All graphs show an increased cell phone usage during the baseline conditions and a decreased cell phone usage during the DRO conditions. Treatment fidelity, wherein participants completed an intervention checklist, is marked on the graph with a TI with an arrow pointing to the data point for the session the intervention checklist was completed for. Data points or sessions where there is an asterisk present sessions that were used for IOA calculation. So prior to the implementation of DRO phases, all participants accessed their phones for at least 5 minutes per study session, with a mean of 9.6 minutes on phone during initial baseline and a mean of 10.8 minutes on phone during return to baseline. Both the mean and the range increased between baseline and return to baseline phases for all participants. During the implementation of DRO, participants accessed their phones for a maximum of 6 minutes per study session,
with a mean of 1.95 minutes during the initial DRO and 1.9 minutes during the DRO. As mentioned in our procedures, access to streaming service after completion of a study session with no time spent on phone was the reinforcer selected by the group. All sessions in which there was no phone access occurred during the DRO phases. Heather had 7 sessions with no phone access, which is 50% of DRO intervention sessions. Reagan had 2 sessions with no phone access, Selby had 3 sessions with no phone access, and I had 2 sessions with no phone access. For the 3 of us, only 25% or less of our DRO intervention sessions had no cell phone usage. Heather had the highest mean during baseline phases, the lowest mean during DRO phases, and the most amount of sessions where the phone was not accessed at all. As Heather had a greater decrease in phone usage, resulting in more study sessions with no phone access, this may indicate that access to streaming services is a strong reinforcer for Heather. Section 5 conclusions. So when comparing graphs, intervention was successful in decreasing time on our phones. However, it was most successful for Heather. When comparing our data to the data in the original study, there was a 50% decrease in phone usage during their group contingency intervention phase, which is similar to the results that Heather saw. Heather only used her phone for any length of time for 50% of her DRO sessions. By comparison, only 17% of my DRO intervention phases had no cell phone use. This indicates that DRO interventions may be useful decreasing cell phone usage, but more research would have to be conducted as the other 3 participants did not see such dramatic results. As discussed earlier in our presentation, despite their prevalence in our society, increased cell phone usage can be detrimental. While many participants in these studies self-report lack of focus, this can also be measured when looking at test scores and grade point averages. For this reason, it is socially important to continue research on how we can effectively reduce cell phone usage, especially in academic contexts. All right, section 6, limitations. Some significant changes were made from the original project in order to make the project feasible for us. The original study that we replicated followed high school students within a classroom setting. Due to the nature of the online course, study sessions were asynchronous in order to meet the needs of our individual schedules. We met on Thursday nights in order to discuss the project. However, it would not have been possible to have a study session every night due to work and other obligations. Study sessions were also limited to 60 minutes, while the original study had classes that were 90 minutes in length. This means that we were unable to implement a group contingency. While we all conducted study sessions in the same manner as discussed in the procedures, access to reinforcement was limited only by our own behavior rather than the behavior of the group as a whole. Implementing a group contingency may have been more effective, as in the original study, participants that became frustrated with participants who used their phones and thus prevented the group from accessing the reinforcer sometimes became the target of an intervention in which classmates talked to them about not using their phone in class and even offering to hold their phone for anyone who was struggling with limiting their phone usage. As many of us live in different states and there is no way we can physically prevent the other participants from accessing their phones if we so wished. As mentioned in the initial study, the behavioral expectations of the peer-mediated contingency may have had an effect on the study, as in addition to the reinforcer of the students having access to their phone and uninterrupted at the end of class. Participants may have been seeking peer approval. While participants were not allowed to access their phones during the intervention phase, the procedure does not call for the limiting of other technology or distractions. Depending on the technology available, participants may have been able to access media typically accessed on phones, such as text, social media, or music. May also have been able to be accessed on their tablet or their laptop during the study. A similar problem in the initial study was students using the bathroom. While phone usage was measured in the classroom, they could not account for phone usage while the student was in the bathroom. Future iterations of our study may consider broadening the scope from phones to personal technology as a whole. In the initial iteration of our project, we planned on using the app off-screen on our phones. After beginning data collection, at least 2 participants had technological difficulties and were unable to get the app to accurately record the duration of time spent on phone during the study session. This was mentioned previously by both Heather and Regan. As an amendment to the project, timers were allowed to be used in case of app failure, as the app should have immediately began recording as soon as the participant touched the phone, while the activation of the timer required an extra motion to occur at the same time. There may have been a difference in a few seconds depending on the data collection method used. And another thing that I wanted to discuss was the IOA. So when it comes to calculating the IOA, it may have been affected by the way we decided to round up the numbers. So for example, if Heather and I were having an IOA session and I recorded 1 minute and 12 seconds, and she recorded 1 minute and 22 seconds, we would both round down to 1 minute. So that resulted in 100% IOA. However, if we recorded both minutes and seconds, we would have only had an 88% IOA. And that is the conclusion of our project. These are all the articles we referenced and shall be discussed during our literature review. Thank you for watching, and please reach out if you have any questions.
Thanks.